Hi guys, the topic of this video is connecting MIRACK to your modular setup using Expert Sleepers ES-9. So your Expert Sleepers has come and you've put it in a power case and power supply, and notice we need a cable that goes from USB-C to USB-A. The one we have here is an argon, and it talks about charge and how many amps it can charge. We are not interested in how many amps it can charge, because in actual fact ES-9 draws no power at all over the cable. So the little trick, just make sure that it's not only a charging cable. At the back it says here a 408 transfer rate, 480 megabits per second, but that lets you know that it will do data as well as charging, so you want to make sure of that. Sorry, was so anxious to get going with the video that I didn't turn off the air purifier, so now we have a little less noise. Okay, the only other item you need is the adapter here, which is often referred to as the lightning to camera adapter for the Apple iPad. It has a lightning cable on one end, and you can extend the lightning in version 2, so you can put other lightning things there, and you have a USB socket, a USB-A socket. So you just get one of these little babies, and of course your iPad, and of course the bigger screen iPad you have, the better. Here we have our trusty 12-inch second generation iPad Pro, which we are going to use as our MIRACK. So the first thing you're going to want to do is plug in the dongle and let it settle into the iPad, because it has a chip inside of it, and you're going to want to make sure that that powers up before you actually try to make your USB connection. So you plug in your USB and turn it on, and success is signaled by those two little small red LEDs right underneath the connection. One of them is always on, which is the power, and the other one comes on when you've established a successful connection to a host device. So as long as you see the two little dots like that right underneath your cable, you know you're good to go. Next, you open MIRACK on your iPad, import a 16-channel input and output module, which can be gotten from the MIDI and I/O. All you need is 16 in and 16 out, and just drop it there, and it will instantly connect to your ES-9, and those inputs and outputs will become the inputs and outputs of the ES-9. There you can see I have one patch cord going from an output to an input, and that will route the signal back from the in to the out on our ES-9 and allow us to test every channel and see that our ES-9 is working properly before we even attempt to create patches. To do patching in MIRACK is perfectly easy. You just use the Apple Pencil, touch one of the sockets, and drag it towards another one, and boom, out comes a patch cable and connects it to where you want to go. To take away a patch cable and make it disappear, you just grab it on a jack, move it away, and boom, it's gone. To test your module, you just need a positive and negative source of DC voltage, such as you would get from mass, but I'm just going to take it from my 5U synthesizer. So I just take a longish patch cable and plug it into the output of my signal processor, and you see here I have offset, so I can make it positive or negative, minus 5 volts, plus 5 volts if I don't plug anything into the input. And you can do the same thing with maths. It has a similar function. I have some patch cables that go from 1/4 inch to 3.5 millimeter on the way, but right now I'm just using this module here that has 8/4 inch going to the 3.5 millimeter to connect between my 5U system and my Eurorack. So we simply plug it in and plug it into input 1 of the ES-9. When we apply a positive and negative DC voltage here, like so and so, just wiggle it a little past the 0, we see that the jack is a lighted jack. It alternatively lights up red and blue, showing us that we have an input coming in there that's positive, that's negative. Blue is negative, red is positive. Now the channel numbering may confuse you a little bit at first, because while the inputs do indeed come from number 1 to 14, your outputs from 1 to 9 actually are on channel 9 to 16. 1 is actually connected to output 16 with a green jumper cable, as you can see there. So output 16 is going to cause the light to come on in output 8, because remember, 9 is 1 and 8 is 16. But before we can get that to happen, although the connection has been made on the MIRACK, there is a play arrow right over here next to the settings. And if I hit the play, see, it turns to a pause. So actually my MIRACK only runs when I press the play button, play and pause, just like a movie or an audio recording. But now that I have actually started it running, you will see that as I make it alternatively positive and negative, the 8 jack goes red and blue along with the input. It's being routed through the MIRACK in the iPad from where I'm putting in the input back to the output. So it's coming right from the input of the ES-9 into the MIRACK. I've got it routed right back out, and it's coming right out there on output 8. So you can test your MIRACK, your iPad, your interface, all by just changing your patch cable here to route all the inputs to the outputs, and make sure that all inputs and outputs on your ES-9 are working. So the last thing that I would tell you before I go is that the default when it comes to you is that all the inputs are AC coupled instead of DC coupled, and it's up to you to use the configuration utility to change them to DC if you want. DC coupling will allow to use your CV. Obviously, if you have the input AC coupled, it's more suitable to using audio. So here's what I did. I made the first 8 inputs DC so that they correspond with the outputs for control. Since we have more inputs than outputs anyway, I left my 9 to 14 as AC coupled, and I can use them for feeding audio into my MIRACK. And I can use the 8 ins and the 8 outs for the modulation or CV signals. So how do we know whether our input is set for AC or DC coupling? Well, as you can see right now, it's set for DC coupling. I plug it into 9, which is my first AC coupled input, and I route my patch cable to 9. When I come here now on my ES-9, watch what happens with the 8. I get a red and it disappears after less than a second. And then I go negative blue, it disappears. That's a sure evidence that we have AC coupling on our input, because our input is still blue, but we have nothing there on the 8. But when I now make it positive, it just lights up for a short while. Right, so now you know how to identify and set AC and DC coupling on your inputs, and how to run with your MIRACK. And of course you can bring in all sorts of modules, oscillators or whatever, and your MIRACK becomes part of your modular setup. So guys, thanks for watching, and we're going to have much more to tell you about this whole thing in future videos.